begin the luncheon program.
It's in print.
So push your chair back a little and relax. My name is Jim Nagel. I hope I've met everyone here, and if I haven't, please introduce yourself at some point to me, and I'd like to get to know everyone who's associated with the society and who studies the short story professionally. So don't be shy about coming up and grabbing me by the sleeve or whatever, and I will enjoy meeting you. It's my pleasure today to introduce Dory LaRue, who is the author of a novel, Resurrecting Virgil, published by the University of Nebraska Press, and a forthcoming novel called The Trouble with Student Affairs from Artemis Press. She also has a chapbook of poetry called Seeking the Monsters, a full-length collection of poetry called Mad Rains, and a forthcoming collection of poetry called An Enemy in Their Mouths. She recently received second place for Only Visiting This Planet, a collection of short stories, in the West Virginia Writing Awards for 2019. She has attended Breadloaf Writers and Squaw Valley Writers workshops. Her fiction and poetry and book reviews have appeared in a variety of journals, including the Southern Review, the Maryland Poetry Review, and the American Poetry Review. She lives in Shreveport, Louisiana, and teaches writing and literature at Louisiana State University. Please welcome Dory LaRue.
Hello. You can keep eating, it won't bother me. I had some trepidation about reading this story because it's X-rated, and I mentioned it to a few of you, and you assured me that the Symposium prefers X-rated stories. So here goes. It's called Student Affairs. Somehow, after explicating Wordsworth's Ode to Immortality, Joyce, who could afford neither time nor memories, extended her lecture to the confines of her office, held forth over coffee in the student union, and finally sitting naked on her bed, concluded her pronouncements to one of her equally naked students, Alexei Vladimirovich. Alexei stepped from his own dream of human life, represented to Joyce her very first break with her self-imposed rule, never to have sex with a student who was not her former student. Normally, this limited supply was restricted to rare trysts at conferences when she came upon a graduate student who in retrospect seemed fascinating and just about to give his precocious paper on Browning or the Graveyard Poets, or on one memorable occasion, Spike Lee. Alexei was not. He was a refugee from Bosnia. No, not a refugee. He did not like that nomination. Perhaps he preferred immigrant. He did not say. He was 28 years old. He was a 28-year-old science student, 1 year older than Joyce, whose war-torn country had forced him to flee to the United States. What recommended him? Their first exchange had been in a freshman modern fiction class, engaged in a close reading of Borowski's This Way to the Gas, ladies and gentlemen, a story Joyce had taught before, and with, at least in North Carolina, a modicum of student involvement. First, she situated the story within its historical context, and then she pointed out the first unity, the deceptively pastoral surround, handedly demonstrated the subsequent unities of time, drew the student's attention to point of view, and added vocabulary terms to a list given in the previous class. Bildungsroman, epiphany, resolution, functioning voice, finally, ethical dilemma. Are we good people? And ending with a clincher, how Borowski's manipulation of point of view forced the reader to sympathize with the story of a man who survived the camp for the reason that he contributed directly to the deaths of his fellow inmates in exchange for his own survival. What's capo, Dr. Michalak? Said Matthew Duffy in a sleep husky voice. Anyone? Anyone? Joyce preferred students to answer each other's questions. No one seemed to remember, or more likely no one seemed to bother to look the word up, even though it was on the previous vocabulary handout. It is slang, Matthew, meaning those prisoners who were given low-level jobs in the camp. It is Cremo Esperanto, and what's that? Cremo Esperanto, said Scott Harrison. All vocabulary words. Joyce forced her tolerant face. Cremo is short for crematorium, a phrase invented by Borowski for Esperanto, an international jargon that, She delved around to find appropriate phrases for the freshmen. His builded, international, supplementary language came a clear, uninflected voice. A young man on the back row, fair skin, lapidary nose, playful smile, cobalt laser eyes, Alexei. "Thank you," said Joyce. "Please," she began her description of the state-sponsored methodical murder against the background of great change in rhetorical issues, and how the story addressed the concerns of a postmodern human existence by articulating various concentration camp myths and motifs. Alexei's accent and big words, as the freshmen say, seemed to have roused a few students. Some were craning around him with interest, or it could have been he had become, she fancied in retrospect, slightly electrical, despite his reasonable expression. The beginning of, she learned to recognize, not so much a playful smile as an ironic smile. "Why did he sell out, Dr. Michalak?" said Charlotte Mosley. "Two trends in Holocaust literature have been noted by critics," said Joyce. She'd like to give as many answers as possible to some questions and have the students deduce which of them their backgrounds and experiences drew them to. Glancing at her teacher's manual, she cribbed. The first finds a mythical subgenre that says experiences like these allow prisoners to find meaning in their experience, and that each tries to help others along the way, and in the end have become spiritually triumphant. The other body declares that experiences such as these have no real meaning. Those in the camps only seek to survive, except to survive, moral tenets gained in the normal world must be discarded. Which legend class do you think Borowski's work lies within? One hand appeared. Yes, Alexei? All should find camp experiences meaningless, Alexei said with a kind of callous joviality. If someone makes it meaningful, it's bullshit. The question is good, selling out. Why did he sell out? Because surviving a not ennobling experience. Prisoners hate enemy, hate each other, split in groups that hate each other. Confinement in camp, not place of superhero, place of failure. One must throw far away, how you say, a principle to survive. Please go on, Alexei, said Joyce. Perhaps each student like Alexei would be able to find symbol and metaphor as a means to connect Auschwitz to their own experiences, the teacher's guide had explained. This may be a good time to introduce the idea of reality as a social construct. Someone took your coat, shoes, said Alexei. That means freeze to death. So you took someone else's coat, shoes. Who took someone else's? Is survival simple to explain? The class seemed collectively quiet, as though they had perceived a radically strange head among them. Where are you from? Said Barry, a bit suspiciously. I'm from Sarajevo, Bosnia-Herzegovina. Is that in Iraq? No, former Yugoslavia. Like in Yugo cars? Or God's way of teaching geography. She said, so we have to do who does do seemingly immoral things to survive, but he doesn't really harm anyone with this overt violence. He is, in the end, not saved by his actions, but only by good luck. Who would blame him, hinted Joyce before she caught herself, even though she wanted the students to understand the concept of multiple truths, narratives within narratives, the signs and symbols of labyrinths, how important it was to describe rather than evaluate. It was her dirty little secret that she was partial to those truths consistent with sensitivity and compassion. She could not exercise all her hick background. Me, says Alexei. He was smiling broadly, personally, persistently at her. I would, Alexei Vladimirovich, I would blame him. Alexei was very warm and slender with the long, smooth muscles of a swimmer and calm, impassive eyes. When he spoke, his eyes lost their impassivity and penetrated hers from under a single forelock of coarse blonde hair that brush-stroked his brow in a Byronic way. Joyce, as a student of literary convention, intrigued by voice, all the various tones and slippages and nuances, was made to conclude that Alexei was a man of unique experiences, though, of course, his reasoning did not appeal to her as consistent with her own meaning-making process. This was to be expected in a freshman class. Culturally constructed perceptions, such as ineffable guilt, were always relative in nature. Nevertheless, she did offer her usual globally tolerant point of view that the camp had driven the protagonist bonkers. And why? She could not say. Perhaps Alexei's ultra-solid perceptions and his mock serious tone seemed oddly to resist meaning made from her own experiences, and at the time it did not seem important. More important was the fine, sloping Slavic lines of his face, emphatic eyes under a bright forelock, and her pulse stomping away. In her office, one day soon after he had interrupted Joyce's pronouncements about the 7 ages of man and the life of the soul and their attending metaphors by touching her hand as it moved down the page, sending an electric volt up her entire arm. Joyce, who could settle, would have been able to settle comfortably for platonic intrigue, as she sometimes practically did, understood from experience that certain discrete experiments of the flesh could cure a multitude of ills. For a while, that is, if nothing went too terribly wrong. And second, that sexual encounters built up in extremely dangerous situations were particularly exquisite. Most importantly, and even more practically speaking, she believed heard melodies could be as sweet as, if not sweeter, than unheard. Mostly, though, Joyce was sitting under her lavender bed canopy in this state of languidness and joy, and yes, with a tad of abject terror, not only because the opportunity had presented itself, but she also knew her forthcoming book would make her nearly invincible. After they exhausted Wordsworth, they exhausted themselves and polished off revolutionary excess and the abolishment of the Liberian veto. "Tell me about your country," she said. "May I please remove the cat?" Alexei tentatively poked at Dr. Pangloss's porcine carcass, had all the earmarks of being a non-initiating cuddler, but did not seem averse to Joyce curling up around him. Bosnia-Herzegovina, more of a buffer zone than country. It is place Serbia and Croatia gather, historically, as you say, together on occasion to slug it out. Known for gross national product, crimes against humanity. Also known as land of the espresso. Despite destroyed factories, burned up mosques, razed McDonald's, pissed off one-legged guys, and many graveyards, also known as safe zones, people are depressed as they eventually discovered war creates more war. Dark humor, said Joyce, making a shooing motion at the deposed Pangloss, whose affronted face had popped up over the side of the bed. So Bosnia-Herzegovina become one country, 2 neighborhoods separated by a dash, supervised by some other guys. Much fun is spent deciding if language should be called Bosnian-Croatian-Serbian, Croatian-Bosnian-Serbian, or Serbian-Bosnian-Croatian. Why do you say Bosnian? Isn't the word Bosniak, said Joyce, isn't that the new word for Bosnian? No, Bosnians who are Muslims are called Bosniaks, which unfortunately rhymes with English maniacs. Not all Bosnian Muslims, but all Muslims in Bosnia are Bosniaks. Not all maniacs are Bosniaks. You're a Muslim, said Joyce. Me, said Alexei. Aha, me, Muslim. Here's Joe. Mujo and Soljo run through the streets of Banhal Luka. They run into mosques, but hardy heart, you would have thought one of them would have seen it. I too eschew religion, said Joyce. I am, I guess the term for me is secular Christian. I observe Christmas, for example. I buy presents, sometimes put up a tree. Oh, very well, I'm known to put up lights, a simple crash. I know my behavior is just a repressed referent, a cultural construct. I like to think of myself as participating out of an acknowledgement of my heritage, even though I know every holiday is just a construction of unreality. One day divorced from the others and made socially utilitarian. I suppose as long as one is cognizant of all that, there's no harm. Why we still need the ceremonial precepts is a total mystery. Maybe you consider yourself a secular Muslim? She wished she could tell her friend Regina so. The cat is back, Alexei said. The late morning sun was coming on, distilled through the curtains, and could not have been more suitable for metaphysical banter. She wiggled her toes deliciously. Joyce had loved those moments that reinforced her theory that her adult life had been analogous to one long novel of ideas, info-novel, as such is known. Her bedrooms functioning as drawing rooms where flesh and blood amours argued with the ghosts of other men of different attitudes prompted by the prevailing intellectual interest of the age, and rendering Joyce privy to the newest theoretical pronouncements in psychology, linguistics, physics, philosophy, now modern history. Of course, it was, to be honest, a superficial understanding for the most part. But how lucky some of her introverted teachers had made her. At parties, interviews, a smattering of esoteric perceptions could always come in handy and make one look globally conscious. True, Alexi's perceptions were couched in jokes, but it was the knowing attitudes that gave you the edge, the irony, the rarefied diction. And now perhaps she was getting a little demonstration of, as some cognitive psychology pre-doc lover who was writing his dissertation on the uses of humor may have pointed out, Alexi's possible enabling emotional catharsis, his humor alleviating anxiety, exposing absurdities. Perhaps, too, the disembodied voice of Joyce's old lover threw in. Alex was creating a defensive denial to hide feelings from his own painful history. History. The makings of history had somehow collided two people together. Nothing possibly could be predicted. Watching the evening news for years with her hazy idea of what and where of the Balkans, she would have never guessed that Milosevic, who on news briefs looked like a pleasant Midwestern businessman, would have affected anything having to do with her sex life. All that condensed attention by one country determined to take one over another had evoked a series of related events until by some magical progression, the culmination of this particular hour. A lost youth, lost education, a war, Wordsworth, a series of loosely connected metaphors, a mutual orgasm. I should go. Will I come back? Time later to go into Ovid and Chrétien de Troyes and explain the rules of courtly law, though oddly enough, neither one of them was married. He had not lied, she had not lied. Of course, she said, I wouldn't like to urge that we meet. She put her tongue in the hollow of his throat for emphasis. Oh God, he whispered as though to an audience. The late morning sun was coming on, still through the curtains and could not have been more suitable. As Alexei pulled his wristwatch toward him from the bedside, his movement caused the aroma of his body to lift toward her, of what she could not say, but if she had to, while time, perhaps, and aniseed, Joyce felt slightly pulled earthward by an inexorable law of weightlessness, floating, her flesh itself destroyed by generous intimacy. The late morning light broke through the curtains, raw and elemental, spilled down the 100-year-old walls, and the delicious boy pulling on his jeans, pulling on his T-shirt with his insolent, lustful Rolling Stones tongue, stopping to seal something with a kiss. What? The forbidden aspects of it all, maybe? Primitive as our use of idioms, simply a basic conversational kind of modal intercourse. What more life? Perhaps, considering the light and shadows, a camcorder. I never know how to do a hiatus. This is a hiatus. Dr. Joyce Michalak, one earring missing, as well as a scarf she had worn for her earlier class, stood before her Tuesday, Thursday, 2 o'clock sophomore literature students and, peering from the back row, the tribunal face of Dr. Philip Tinsley, who had apparently decided to spring a surprise evaluation. The late morning hours of love-making before lunch had concluded her class preparation time. With a horrible sinking feeling, Joyce opened the voluminous anthology after considerable fumbling for the page to the day's lesson, Robert Gray's poem, Down, Wanton Down. Who will read today, she said, willing a confident tone. Usually Joyce called on the student at the beginning of every class to read the poem for the day, to refresh the memories of those who had read it prior to class, and to provide a chance at the text for those who had neglected to read it, of which she was at the moment. Usually there was one at least volunteer, but today the rude stranger, one of the gang of 4 which made up the tender committee, whose style in Joyce's opinion ran to what would be called in another age dandified, dressed as he was in smart plaid vests and tailored dockers, elicited shyness in even the most normally chatty. Avoiding eye contact, almost everyone was bent over desk as if suddenly fascinated with their grubby notebooks, or they were leaning down engaged in elaborate tugging on their backpacks. Read the poem once, will you please, Julia, and then we'll take it apart line by line, or shall I say complete thought by complete thought. And what do we call this type of analysis? The assignment so far for the whole portrait unit had been explication, and even though she had used that term perhaps every class, the students were struck dumb. Explication, we are explicating poems. This is a process of analysis in which we take the poem apart to reveal all the nuances of the text. Now please, Julia. There was a commotion at the door as Bishop, her habitually late student trying to slip in, hit the metal trash can. Amid the snorts of laughter to stumble down the row and take his seat directly in front of Dr. Tinsley, who seemed to decide the event was notable and started scribbling. Dr. Michalak, it was Julia who seemed to be blushing, ducking her head under a silky swish of raven hair. All the men in class were in love with Julia, who had somehow managed to combine the looks of a supermodel with a completely reticent, timorous demeanor. I just don't care for this poem. I just prefer not to read it. I mean, if it's about what I think it's about, then I don't want to read it. Nonsense, Julia. You're one of our best readers. The only halfway literate one in the class, she pulled forward. Julia blushed again. I prefer not. Bishop, always trying to redeem himself with his good nature and willingness to participate in sometimes half-cogent remarks, waved his hands. I'll do it, Dr. Michalak. Very well, Bishop, thank you. Julia relaxed. The class shuffled a bit, getting comfortable. Dr. Tinsley appeared vastly bored with this exchange. Hit it, Bishop, Joyce said. Lay it on us, trying to appear the with-it cool teacher. She telepathically lectured to the class. It's just an evaluator, a full professor with a snooty expression and a penchant for expensive conservative clothes. He doesn't want your heads. Down, wanton, down, read Bishop indifferently. Have you no shame that if a mention of love's name or beauty's, presto, up you raise your angry head and stand at gaze? Poor Bombard captain, sworn to reach the ravelin and effect a breach, indifferent what you storm or why. Do that he in the breach you die. Love may be blind, but love at least knows what is man, what is mere beast, or beauty fickles, but requires more delicacy as her squire. Tell me, my witness, who one boast could be your staunchness, said Joyce, with a growing horrible sense that she occupied an unalterable state of affairs. Staunchness and your post, for you were made a man of parts, to think fire and profess the arts. Will many gifted beauty come bowling to your ballroom of thumb? There was another shuffling wave that went through the class, and Bishop seemed to lose his place for a second. Or lose, swear loyalty to your crown. Begone, have done, down, wanted, down. Dr. Joyce Michalak, Ph.D. in Romantic Literature, LSU, MA, BA, University of Louisiana Lafayette, summa cum laude, Phelps Dodge General Scholarship, Darity Scholarship, Regent Scholarship, NEH Fellow, author of a beginning but comprehensible series on the representation of gender and voice and radical sensibility in Jane Austen, with a forthcoming Oxford Press and print, stared down at the text before her, the words which had suddenly decided to swim chaotically across the page. The arrows of outrageous fortune pointed as one overpowering question slammed the neurons of her brain. What the fuck does that mean? The students waited. Dr. Tinsley, who had apparently neglected to bring a text, reached over and motioned to one of the students to borrow his book. Dr. Tinsley perused the page. His manner became scrutinous. He touched the angle of his cheekbone thoughtfully and with the polished manner of one who had published and published well. There was simply no way to pull this off. She could not draw upon one of her critical lectures that she practiced before her developmental students, banding about obscure literary terms. But these students, older and wiser, would have none of that. She grabbed wildly at a passing thought. Perhaps she could pull off one of those Socratic question and answer things, a Socratic dialogue, with the teacher pretending not to know the answers, sweating astute analysis out of the students by well-timed and well-placed leading questions. She would take Socrates one step further, beyond the Socratic method. She did not have to pretend to not know. Pregnant pause ensued, like to be aborted. A wave of terror coursed down her spine, the same spine so happily engaged a few hours ago. Time to speak, and cogently. Well, said Joyce, finally, brightly, as though she had planned this moment of silence for deep, meditative, poetic analysis, but now had given just about enough time to magnify. Thank you. And who shall begin? Let's try this. Let's everyone make one intelligent remark about the poem. Rueful laughter from the class. Dr. Tinsley's frown deepened. Remember, you have it in you to understand. Just let the connotations of the words speak to you. And it's not important to understand every single thing in the poem. Perhaps the poem looks deceptively complex, she added, more for her sake than theirs. Just as we have poems at times that look deceptively simple. Barry, would you begin? The students straightened up a little, knowing they would not get out of being called upon. She had done this little exercise before with varying degrees of success. For a second, she became lightheaded. Inexplicably and perversely, a vision of Alexis' back, his square shoulders above her, floated by briefly. Go away, please. Barry? Barry licked his lips with the attitude of one who had given something much thought. The poem's about war or something. He's this guy on a ship or something, and he doesn't know what to do, and he's talking to someone. All right, Barry, thank you, Susan, Joyce said to her horror, hopefully. Susan was one of those women who carried an unending supply of liquid paper in her purse in order to make neat corrections on her class papers. Students who did that, symbol mongers, as Joyce called them, were capable and willing to see a symbol in everything. It was a gender-specific affliction, but it might come in handy now. Bombard captain. Bombard means to attack or accost. Susan had a little dictionary she kept on her person at all times, in addition to the liquid paper. So I guess it's one way to say he's the captain, the head honcho, and he's talking to someone who's ready to attack, but maybe he isn't too smart. Does that word have anything to do with bombast, Dr. Michelak? She added. Does it, Susan? Said Joyce. Dr. Tinsley's frown had been replaced by a glare. Does that dictionary of yours explore the roots of words? Answer a question with a question, just like an administrator. They were both saved by Meredith. Dr. Michelak, I think it could be the author writing about himself. Standard answer. Maybe he's an author writing to his own writer's block. It says, poor Bombard captain, like he needs pity. Interesting, Meredith. Too many women were talking. Dr. Tinsley could easily put down that instructor does not encourage male point of view. Logan, what's a ravelin, Dr. Michelak? Is it like a javelin? Said Logan, stalling. She didn't blame him. Some kind of weapon, dumbass, said Bishop. Julia sat between Logan and Bishop, which made both the men on edge with each other. Eddie, a sweet-faced country boy, turned slightly stiff-backed, looked at Bishop, then over-knowingly at Dr. Tinsley. Bishop half-turned, saw the stranger in their midst, and made a slight oops shrug. They were trying to help. For a second, Joyce felt teary. Then a horribly long silence fell, the only audible sound Dr. Tinsley's pen. With every scratch, Joyce's head became blanker and blanker. A breach, someone volunteered. Isn't that a hole? Or pit or something? Or something on a gun? Breech loader? Isn't that something? This poem is terrible, said Tiffany. Long at least knows what is man and what is beast, read Lakeisha Morris. Well, duh. I don't know, disagreed someone. That sort of gets to me, but the rest is stupid. Who's my witness? Is that the captain's sailor? Does he think he's stupid? Is he talking to his buddy or his enemy? I can't tell. Obviously, the poem was so obscure, it had moved the class to discussion. The whole thing is lame. Like, is this a misprint, ball, rule of thumb? Shouldn't it be bowl, rule of thumb? Like, ball doesn't make sense. Perhaps the answer is in your question, Joyce said, stupidly, mechanically. She could try the late edition of the MLA job list. She would have to list the house. Francine Ford raised her hand amid the racket. Dr. Michelak, Judy thinks it's about a, yes, Francine? An almost imperceptible giggle emanated from Francine. Francine, who had affected a bored, pissed-off expression since the beginning of the term. Judy's patina had shaded the color of a pale strawberry. Dr. Tinsley's pen was poised, confident, alert. A thing. Things such as William's no ideas, but in things. No, a man's thing, like his penis, And it makes sense. Listen. Above the laughter, she read while Julia's complexion now deepened to the color of a ripe strawberry. Effective breach, indifferent what you store or why, bowing to your ball rule of thumb. Oh yeah, an enlightened voice contributed. Ball rule of thumb, that does make sense now. And indifferent what you storm, doesn't care what it gets as long as it gets some. I hear that, laughter. And presto, up you raise. Ways of laughter. Joyce looked down, feeling her phony facilitator's smile she had plastered on her face dissolve into one of horror. Bishop was reading again, his voice dramatic and interested now, explicating as he went. Down, Wanton, down, have you no shame? Law's name of beauties, excitedly. He can screw for lover just because someone's pretty. Presto, up you raise your angry head. General laughter, squeals of delight. And stand it, gaze. It's an erection. Julia's right. Man, you mean you just have the heart on? Whoa, can you write a poem about that? He's talking to his thing. Joyce realized a perfectly inane expression had frozen her face. Dr. Tinsley's face could not unglare itself. And the breach must be, you know, a vagina, said Eddie, as though he did not have much experience in pronouncing the word, or much experience. Bishop resumed reading. Through the rest of the poem, Joyce stared at the printed words as they arranged themselves upon the page, clear as prose. The student's interest began to soothe the buried, authentic teacher deep inside her, far away from the dramatic persona she knew she fell back on when in doubt. Of course! Bless Julia's inhibited, intelligent little head. It had to be true. Please, let it be true. Was it true, or was she still in the throes of Alexa's aniseed? She would make it true. Embarrassment and relief and something else, the thought of Alexa's thumb wantonly flushed Joyce's cheeks. It was true. To think fine and profess the arts? Been there, done that, this morning. Alexi, their many gifted orgiastic moment, love, swearing, loyalty, at least for the duration of the day. Begone, have done, Bishop finished triumphantly. Down, wanted, down. Lord have mercy, said Jolene, a fundamentalist who thought all poetry was always at least vaguely sinful. She was fanning herself with her notebook. And Jolene's totally sinful, untenured assistant professor was remembering Alexi rising like the sun, and with each zenith, she herself was gaining such a degree of composure so that she could finally speak, could address the class as if a full professor who wanted her dead was not sitting on the back row, was not glowering, his pen seemingly permanently frozen in midair. Bless Robert Graves, that sexist, phallocentric, alliterative old cuckoo. And what do we call a dress like this, class, to someone I usually address? Speak for yourself, she heard muttering from the back row, from one of the guys she had thought aphasic all semester to appreciative laughter. Judy was raising her hand for once in her life. Apostrophe? Correct, said Joyce. Presto. 30 minutes later, Joyce was tying up her presentation, still under Dr. Tinsley's glare, like a persistent headlight, but not so disconcerting now. And so, class, she can't help saying, in the final analysis, human beings are sexual creatures, and it's this fact that drives literature by some, particular Lacanian, analyses. Start with Homer. Read everything from Homer to Mad Magazine to see these elemental characteristics of modal consciousness in our most patriarchal, concentric discourses. Any last question? A student was wildly waving his hand. Yes, Barry? What you just said, will that be on the test? Any questions? Okay.
I hesitate to ask, but what gave you the idea for this story?
It didn't exactly happen to me. I had the foresight to read the teacher's key before I taught that poem, and some teacher had penciled in, know what this poem is about before you teach it. So I thought that would make a funny story for someone who did teach it. I forgot to mention Joyce is kind of a slut before I began, but she is. Yes?
From a writer's point of view, what do you take to be the essential elements of a story?
Oh, well, first point of view. Once you can get a handle on whose story is it, then the writing seems to help essentially. And then a character has to kind of speak in your ear. It sounds crazy, but you just hear a voice. There's someone talking in your ear, and you know that's the voice, and then you start writing the way I outlined. I don't know if that's what most normal people do.
Some people would say conflict and resolution.
Well, resolution, I'm not sure. I guess, on some way, I guess that if your vision is working in the story, there would be some kind of resolution, but sometimes I think stories can just hang without having a resolution. I always thought Death of a Salesman was kind of spooling without resolution. And in all our movies about Vietnam, they sometimes just kind of freeze frame at the end because there's no solution to the problem. So I think sometimes there's just no solution. And what was the other thing you said? Resolution and conflict. Yeah, oh, certain conflict. There has to be a conflict, or it'll be a documentary. We'll put it down.
What about psychological movement? some transformation in a central character?
Are you talking about character change? Okay. I think most of my characters change. It may take a long time. This story, I don't think the character changed that much. She seemed to kind of be the same person at the end. She just kind of got out of a predicament by luck. But I think most of my short stories, there is at least, it may not be a giant change, but it's a permanent change. It may be a small change, but you feel like it's a permanent change. Yes.
I really like the drama of the classroom, and we all recognize it in some kind of way, ideal audience. But I also kept expecting the lover of the morning to kind of rise up and speak. Because you just, yeah, I know he's in another class, but nevertheless, you still expect the one of the leading characters of the morning. That's not.
I think that would make the story probably into a novel. It would probably be more complicated than
Oh,
I
I
was
like
hoping
that it's
for.
not there. I think that adds a moment of terror to that, because people are trying to figure out which class they're in.
Anything else? Okay,
Well, thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much.
I do have to apologize. I really didn't even recognize that you were going to read. Oh, really? Let me just turn that off.